Every time an archaeological artifact is discovered, it's an opportunity to learn from the past. The problem is that we don't always understand the lessons. There are so many holes in our knowledge of the people who came before us that it's sometimes difficult to interpret the things they left behind for us to find. All we can do is take our best guess with the information available to us. So, let's do it. We know that the ancient occupants of Scotland were called the Picts, but that's close to being all we know about them. Nearly everything we think we know about this race is drawn from biased Roman records, which makes our next discovery all the more important. It's a carved and engraved pictish stone, and it was found close to the likely site of an ancient battle that led to the foundation of the Scotland that we know today. To be more specific, the discovery was made in a field in Aberlemno, close to Forfar. The markings on its surface have been interpreted as depicting scenes from the Battle of Nectansmere, which occurred in the 7th century. The battle saw Pictish king Brydi Macbilly defeat Egfrith, king of the Anglo-Saxons. The defeat prevented the Anglo-Saxons from reaching any further north and provided enough space and time for Scotland to form in the space the Anglo-Saxons had attempted to stake a claim to. The Picts didn't have a written language and kept virtually no historical records, so this stone is about as rare as it gets. We've got an Egyptian discovery for you next. It's the remarkable find of a series of administrative buildings and silos in Kom Ombo on the banks of the Nile River. Back in the days of ancient Egypt, this part of the country was known as Nubt, a name that translates into English as the City of Gold. Many of the newly discovered buildings and rooms can be dated to the First Intermediate Period, which began in 2180 BCE and lasted until 2050 BCE. The 20 silos at the site all appear to have been used to store grain. The City of Gold name comes from the fact that this was once a vital hub of commercial activity in ancient Egypt, but during its peak years, it was just as important as a center of agriculture. However, the people who bought their grain from Nubt might have gotten more than they bargained for. Archaeologists have found rat bones and fossilized rat feces inside the silos, indicating that rodent infestation was a serious problem. The money that was made in Nubt paid for the construction of the Temple of Kom Ombo, which is dedicated to the crocodile-headed god Sobek, and is one of the most remarkable structures in the area. While it would be fair to call the Venus of Willendorf sculpture somewhat unflattering, we can all agree that it's an interpretation of the female form. Although why there are no arms and why the head has such an odd surface are matters of much conjecture. That's far from the strangest thing about it, though. Incredibly, seeming almost impossibly in fact, this Oolitic limestone sculpture is more than 30,000 years old. A civilian named Josef Verum discovered it in the town of Willendorf, Austria in 1908 and was briefly accused of forging it, but testing has confirmed its age. That makes it one of the oldest and most sophisticated works of Stone Age art known to humankind. Some experts believe that women of the era may have carved sculptures like these themselves, with the lack of facial features and disproportionate body sizes attributed to the fact that they didn't own mirrors. Without a reflection, they could only carve according to their own interpretations of their form. That doesn't explain why the statue doesn't have feet or arms, though. We're looking at discoveries old and new in this video, so here's one that comes from 1867. It's the Hin Gohl dagger, which was found on the Danish island of Genoa. Experts consider it the finest example of a fishtail flint dagger in existence, and say that it comes from the end of the Nordic Stone Age. That would make it around 3,800 years old. In Denmark, the Hin Gohl dagger is considered a national cultural icon, so much so that it appears on the country's 100 krona banknote. The description of the artifact as a fishtail dagger comes from the shape of its handle, although you could also argue that the shape of the blade looks like a fish too. It's thought that their design was based on bronze daggers made elsewhere in Europe. Some of these daggers found their way to Denmark, and although the ancient Danes couldn't replicate them, they were able to make something similar from local flint. Similar daggers continued to be made well into the region's Bronze Age, so it was a design that lasted for several centuries. The ancient Romans conquered Britain and then colonized it, but they also did more than that. They turned Britain into an enormously industrious nation. We saw more evidence of that in February 2022 when archaeologists identified evidence of large-scale Roman-era silver extraction at a site called Grange Farm in Kent. It's a location that was first noticed by archaeologists in 2005, with digs and surveys continuing ever since. The team working at the site in February has found the remains of a 3-aisled building with high-status accommodation at one end, fireplaces in the middle, and a metalworking area at the far end. The whole building is surrounded by massive amounts of litharge, which is a byproduct of a method of silver extraction known as compilation. This is the largest Roman-era site of its kind ever identified in the United Kingdom. There's also some evidence that the same location was occupied by a farming community in the late Iron Age, long before the Romans came along, and was first adapted into a salt and ceramic production center by the Romans before they turned their hands to extracting silver. We're staying in England, but switching our attention to London, where a team of experts from the Museum of London Archaeology have uncovered a fabulous ancient Roman mosaic right in the heart of the city. This is the largest preserved mosaic to be found in London for more than half a century, and it was discovered in February 2022. London reached its Roman peak during the early 2nd century, with a population of around 60,000 people enjoying access to a large Roman forum and an enormous basilica, which was one of the biggest in the entire Roman Empire at the time. The mosaic was found during excavations at a site close to the famous Shard building, where preparations are being made for new offices and homes to be built. It's split into 2 decorated panels made from tiny colored tiles set into a tessellated red floor. The archaeologists think the mosaic might have been the floor of a dining room within a large Roman mansio, not to be confused with a mansion. This would have been the ancient Roman equivalent of an upmarket hotel, offering stabling, dining, and accommodation for state officials traveling to and from London from Rome and other important cities in the empire. The United Arab Emirates is something of an unknown country for archaeologists, as there hasn't been much research done there until recently. The experts in the region are making up for lost time as of late, though, and in February 2022, they reported the discovery of the region's oldest known buildings on the tiny island of Gaga. The ancient structures on the island have been examined using carbon-14 analysis on charcoal pieces inside them, thus proving them to be at least 8,500 years old. All of the structures are round in shape and are thought to have been residential dwellings. It was previously thought that there were no permanent dwellings in this region before long-distance maritime trade arrived during the late Neolithic era, but these structures prove that assumption to be incorrect. We don't know anything about the people who lived here other than that they used local stone to make their homes, and based on the finely worked arrowheads inside their homes, they were a hunting community. Whoever they were, they're likely to have been the first ever permanent residents of the UAE. A whole 14 pre-Incan mummies were recently discovered at the archaeological site of Cajamarquilla in Peru, not far from the Peruvian capital city of Lima. The mummies range in age between 800 and 1,000 years. 6 of them are children, but the remainder are adults. Only 2 of the adults are female. It's possible that the remains represent several generations of the same family, but there's a grislier theory. Some of the archaeologists responsible for the find suspect that they might have been sacrificed at the time of the burial of an elite local figure, whose tomb was found close to here in 2021. They would have been intended to become the elite figure's servants in the afterlife. However, there's some evidence here that contradicts that idea. The mummies were buried with personal goods, including knitting tools, ceramic pots, and calabashes. Sacrificial victims didn't tend to be buried with any grave goods at all, so maybe these people escaped that grim fate after all. The pre-Columbian people of the Andes believed that biological death marked the transition of the soul to another world, so fear of death may not have been common. The ancient Romans used ceramic pots for just about everything. They used them to store and transport grain, wine, bread, money, and, as it turns out, human waste. That's right, the Romans also used ceramic pots as portable toilets, and we know that because of a smelly-sounding scientific and archaeological project that concluded in February 2022. A team of experts has been analyzing crusty material found inside the surface of ceramic pots found at the site of a 5th century Roman villa in Sicily. Under a microscope, the crust was found to contain the remains of intestinal parasites. The scientists identified the eggs of whipworm, which is a telltale sign that the ceramic pot once contained human feces. The worm eggs had been clinging to the inside of the pot for more than 1,500 years. They got trapped within layers of minerals that formed on the surface of the pot, ensuring they'd still be there for scientists to find. We're sure you'll be thrilled to know that the discovery is the first time that parasitic eggs have been found inside a Roman ceramic vessel. Hey, nobody ever said that being a scientist was a glamorous job. Next up, we have a very unusual and somewhat macabre discovery that takes us back to Peru. In February 2022, archaeologists in Peru found nearly 200 human spines delicately threaded onto reed posts in the country's Chincha Valley area. Peru is a country of ancient wonders, and archaeologists are used to coming across the unexpected there. But this is a bizarre find even by Peruvian standards. At first, the experts at the scene thought that the spines on posts were erected by the people of the Chincha Kingdom, which existed here from the 11th century to the 15th, before being amalgamated into the Inca Empire. However, the spines have been tested and proven to come from the 16th century. Inca rule was ending by then, and European colonization had begun. Rather than being mounted as a warning, though, it's possible that the spines may have been mounted as a way of remembering the dead. In the Andes, where Europeans looted the graves of the dead for their gold and silver grave goods, natives sometimes made new ritual objects from whatever was left after the Europeans went away. The same could have happened here. Japan's kofun tombs have been of interest to archaeologists for a very long time, and it seems the more that we look at them, the more mysteries we find. In January 2022, a study of satellite images of the tombs revealed for the first time that they were all built in alignment with the rising sun. The keyhole-shaped tombs can be found all over Japan, and every single one of them faces the exact same direction. There's obviously a grand significance to this, but we might never find out what it is, because so much protection is afforded to the tombs. The country's traditions say that the kofuns are connected to the mythological first emperors of Japan, so archaeologists aren't permitted to enter them, let alone excavate them. That's why the secret of their alignment wasn't known until satellite technology made it possible. It's thought that most of the funerary mounds were created between the 3rd and 7th centuries. The largest of them, the Daisen Kofun, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is dedicated to Emperor Nintoku. That's all we can say about them with any certainty until the Japanese finally allow archaeologists inside. Let's go to the UK for one last stunning Roman-era discovery. This wooden figurine was found during an archaeological dig ahead of the construction of the new high-speed HS2 rail network, which will run through the site of the discovery at Three Bridge Mill in Twyford, Buckinghamshire. Radiocarbon dating indicates that it was made somewhere between the years 43 and 70 in the 1st century. Wooden artifacts like this would have rotted away centuries ago under normal circumstances. But in this case, the figurine was protected from that because it was buried under layers of anaerobic clay. Even so, it hasn't quite survived the passage of time without incurring damage. The arms of the figurine are gone, as are the feet, but much of the impressive detailing is still visible, including lines on the tunic and what might even be individual hairs on the calves. Experts are divided on whether the figure has a bouffant hairstyle or whether it's wearing a hat. They're also unsure whether it was buried as a votive offering, which is a gift given to the gods in the hope that they'll bring good fortune, or whether it was intended to be placed in a grave. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!